Good morning. Welcome to MADPD. It's 6 o'clock Mountain Standard Time, and my name is Shane Lawrence. I am here to do a session on cross-curricular learning. So, a little bit of background about me. No, before we get going, we're going to have about 15 minutes of me just talking at you, and then 15 minutes of questions if you have any. Anytime you want to ask a question, you can just fire something into the chat window. Feel free to interrupt. I do very well with that sort of thing. I am very much a non-linear kind of thinker, so I am perfectly happy to depart from my script and address any questions you might have. So if you missed the first few seconds there, again, my name is Shane Lawrence. I am a teacher in Edmonton, Alberta. I'm also a podcaster, the Ed Podcast. And I teach drama 7 through 9, computers 7 and 8, and film studies 8, film studies 9, and a combined 10 through 12 film studies class. And you're going to get tired of me saying film studies because that's going to be the focus of what I'm talking about, not necessarily the wherefores and the whys of film studies itself, but that's the core experience that I'll be talking about when it comes to cross-curricular learning, because that's how I arrived at this whole crazy thing. A couple of assumptions that I'm making if you're here, and again, feel free to ask for clarification if I'm wrong about this, but I'm assuming that you already think cross-curricular learning is a good idea, and I'm assuming you know what cross-curricular learning is. And if you don't, again, feel free to ask, or you'll figure it out as we go. So I want to start out just by going over the things that I have learned doing cross-curricular learning. It's been a bit of a journey for me, and it's very much been trial and error. And I wish I could say I've just got, 5 easy steps towards a cross-curricular program, but it's not quite that straightforward. And it's something I've just learned through making mistakes. I guess that's the best way to learn, isn't it? So why did I go cross-curricular? That's where I'd like to start at first. I started teaching high school film studies a few years ago, and the first year that I was doing it, it became pretty clear to me that the kind of tasks I was putting in front of my kids were a little too big for the course that I had. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it definitely does put some undue stress on the students. And it does make assessment difficult because you're reaching beyond the core curriculum of your course. So cross-curricular started to look like a real natural fit. I had students in my film studies class in which we're supposed to produce a film and study film history, but I had them writing, producing, editing, doing sound and music, visual effects, acting, costume design, location management. It was too much. It was too much, even though the results were awesome and the kids totally bought in. Nonetheless, there was a bit of overreach, I guess. But that's where cross-curricular learning comes in, because rather than choose to let ambition go, to say, well, that's too big, so I guess we're not going to do it, I started to recognize that the task that I had was still really worthwhile. And I think maybe that's the core of why you should be even considering cross-curricular learning, is because you've got something that's real, that's authentic, that has an audience waiting on the other end, that is worthwhile, that is hard to do, but maybe goes beyond the purview of just your course. Not everything needs to be cross-curricular. That's true. And there's actually times where, even though I like to say to my kids, there are no subjects in life, there's times where you do need to kind of close the door. You need to work on your core competencies. You need to work on your addition and multiplication, spelling and grammar. All those things do need some time on their own. I completely support that, because cross-curricular learning is kind of a messy business. We'll get to that though. The thing is, but once we get beyond those core competencies, those basic skills, we get into like the 4 C's of 21st century learning. We get to collaboration, critical thinking, communication, creativity. And that's where this really starts happening. By way of example, I mean, if you think about, you've got something like an assignment in English where you've got students working on posters or visual displays of some sort. I mean, how much time do we have to spend on learning all these other skills to communicate, like graphic design? I mean, how much do you want to be spending time on doing graphic design in English class? How much time do you want to be spending on how to build a building in your math class if you're doing some sort of an architecture unit? It's a great opportunity to go beyond just the demands of your course and start pulling in other courses as well. And so this was the case for me with my film studies class. I realized that I had students going well beyond just the simple crafting of a film and delving into other arts as well. And so I thought, well, hey, I need to move beyond the borders of my classroom. So for me, the first step in going cross-curricular means finding an ally, finding someone that you can work with. I should note that cross-curricular learning, I just wrote it down here and I thought this is worth not skipping over. Cross-curricular learning does not make your life easier. It makes your life better, but it is additional work. But the first thing you need to do is get someone else on board with you. I've been very fortunate to have two people who I've worked with over the last few years who have really supported the idea of combining classes. It takes time, though, with that person. We both had the desire. He taught digital media, which is a lot of sort of computer-oriented units that they do. But it takes time to actually combine those things together. We talked for 2 years on and off to actually decide to get to the point where we actually said, okay, let's do this. And even at that point, it was kind of like jumping out of a plane without really being sure the parachute was going to go off or not. But we thought, what the heck, let's give it a shot. So it was a little scary. But it takes a lot of time to plan and discuss. If you can get administrative support, especially in terms of money for days off, for PD days, so you can get together. We would just kind of sneak off whenever we could. We'd be at teachers conference and we would just head off for lunch together and just sit there and talk. We also got very good at 30-second hallway meetings. So you just kind of cross each other in the hallway and say, okay, what about this? Have you done this? Yeah, I got that. Okay, have you done this? Share this with me. All right, see you later. And then off we go. So having time to really plan this out and figure out where the touch points are between the courses is essential. And you really do have to think that through, and it's going to take a ton of time. The other thing is to really be clear on what your courses are. By way of example, again, coming back to the film thing, we determined ultimately that for my course, my students were responsible for writing, directing, and producing. And that's it. In industry parlance, there's the term above the line and below the line. So basically, any job on a film that's above the line is, well, considered to be artistic, which is writing, directing, producing. Anything below the line is everything else. So we determined, yes, everything in film studies above the line, writing, directing, producing. Digital media, which is sound, cinematography, editing, visual effects, that's below the line. But the point is, we made a clear definition of what the responsibilities of the students were in each course. So on day one, we get together with the kids and say, do you like doing this? Do you like doing this? Yes? Okay, then you go over here. If you don't want to do that, come over here. So, which also brings me to my next point, which is when you are building a cross-curricular program, it's important that the kids know that it's a cross-curricular program, because by default, students assume that every course is its own little thing. It happens in its own little world and they never touch each other. And it's important for them to understand that, no, they are all in one ecosystem. So schedule time to bring your classes together. At the start of the semester, we cram up to 90 kids into one classroom. And, watch out for the fire marshal, I suppose. But we take time to remind them they're working as a team. They are in the same course, so to speak. And that's a little confusing for them. But once they can kind of grab onto that idea, it makes sense to them. And there's a lot of buy-in because they sense that it's something special and it's something different and that they are working together towards a bigger goal. It also is really great for you as an educator, for me as an educator, because it means you get to team teach from time to time. And that is a really fun situation. If you've never been in it, and I know, with funding being what it is, having two teachers in the classroom at the same time is a really challenging and rare thing. So Yeah, it's really, it's a great opportunity for that. The really great thing too is that it gives you community with the rest of the school, and it can lead to some weird situations, which I'll say it right now. Cross-curricular learning, this kind of program, it just gives me the warm fuzzies all over. I love this kind of stuff because it really makes me feel as a teacher that I do have coworkers, that I am part of a community. And you get these weird situations like just a few weeks ago, my students wanted, a couple of them are making some movies that have a fight scene in them. Well, being the concerned person that I am, I don't want broken noses or legs or other things like this. So I hired a fight choreographer who I have, she's been in a few times before. She came in on a Saturday for a full day, but not for my students, but for the drama students, because they're the ones who audition and get hired by my film studies students. So I paid for a guest speaker that was not for my kids. My kids could go. I told them that you can go, but it really was for the actors so that they could learn the skills they needed to not hurt themselves or others. And that worked out really well. And I had a lot of my students, again, who didn't need to go. I told them they didn't need to go, but the buy-in was so big because they viewed themselves as being part of this team that they went along anyways on a Saturday. Now, I mean, granted, learning how to fight is kind of fun too, so there's the draw there. But nonetheless, um, a few things. I got 4 minutes. I can do it. A few things that I have learned from doing this. Avoid overreach. I think that's the biggest thing I've learned. As a program gets bigger and you start to, maybe this sounds bad, but maybe swallow up other courses. Um, as you get to a certain size, you get admin comes on board and they'll say, wow, isn't this great? And then if you start approaching other people, excuse me, it can look like they need to be involved in your course and they can get sucked in just by a sense of obligation. And you don't want that. You don't want bitter, uninvolved people as part of your cross-curricular program. So I'm always very sensitive to that. When I ask people if they want to do something with us, be aware that you need to give them an out if they don't want to, because again, buy-in from your coworkers, the other teachers in the building is so important, because if they're not interested in it, because it's extra work, if they're not interested in it, it's not going to work. You're just going to burn bridges and relationships, and it's not a healthy thing. So also, though, I have also gone too far into the cross-curricular thing at times. Make sure you give students time in your own ecosystem. There are times when you do have to close the door and say, all right, this is us. This is our course. Here's the core competencies we need to work on. Going back to what I said earlier, sometimes you do need to silo your course for a time so that you can build into the students the real nuts and bolts of whatever it is they need to do their job better. So once you do open the doors, though, it's highly important that you give the students the skills they need to communicate with each other. This is always a huge issue. Now, for me, of course, with kids making films, they need to be able to schedule things. They need to be able to figure out their own lives and everything else, book some gear for filming their projects. So it's really important that they know how to communicate with each other. And sometimes it can be just the simple revelation of, well, do you have each other's phone numbers? But there's other tools available as well. I get my kids to use Slack sometimes, and a lot of them use Instagram actually to keep in touch with each other. But point is, make those bridges between the different classrooms so that students are able to actually talk with each other and figure out what it is they need to do, whatever the task is. The benefits, no, one more thing. This is something I've been guilty of too, is don't get too loosey-goosey. I sit back sometimes and I start to bask in the glow of this whole ecosystem that's been created. And there are days where literally it runs itself. I'll walk into a classroom and say, okay, here's what I've got planned, but what do you want to do? And they say, oh, we need to work on this. I need to do that. I need to talk to my cinematographer. I need to phone this place and check on my scheduling. I've got paperwork I need to do. I'm doing storyboarding. And so I say, okay, fine, then off you go. And the class just runs itself. But the danger of that is that it can get too loose, too casual, and the structure just starts to break down just naturally. So you still need to have time where you're bringing kids in again and providing structure and reminding them of what their obligations are. I have production meetings with the teams. I mean, that wouldn't differ from any course really, where you have a large complex task. It's important to stay in touch with your students and make sure that they're on schedule, on task, and they know what they need to do, and that they're able to articulate to you the progress that they're making and the goals they have going forward. Um, what are the benefits of this? Students stop seeing boundaries between classrooms. And I know that I'm making an assumption in saying that that's a good thing, but I truly think it is, because it reflects the world they're going into, where there are no walls between subjects. So it's a pretty frequent thing for me when I'm teaching that a student will simply ask to leave the classroom because they need to go and talk to someone else in another part of the building. And that's fine. And that, again, that warms my heart, because it means they're being responsible for this project, that they have this huge complex task. Just yesterday, I had one of my students, again, she just does not see the boundaries of the course anymore. She needed music for her film. So she actually hired a student from somewhere else in the building who's not part of our ecosystem at all, to write the music for her. And that student said, sure, because he looks in, he sees this amazing thing happening. And so he buys in, and away they go. I had a group of students, years ago. We show our films at the Cineplex Odeon. So we rent out a theater, we have the red carpet, the whole bit. And I saw a huge group of students, about 20 of them, all gathering together to take a picture. And I leaned over to Mr. Cooper, who was the other teacher in this whole the cross-curricular thing. And I said, well, why are they all taking a picture together? And he said, that's one team. And so these students had gone well beyond the boundaries of the course. They had pulled in whoever they needed, and they had a team, a group of 20 people making one project. And if you think about the fact that in a single course, if we have a group of 3 people or 4, that starts to get dangerous, right? We are very much on the edge of disaster a lot of the times. And here we had students who knew what their jobs were, who knew what their roles within the ecosystem were, and they had reached out even further and created a group of 20 people and come out with one really great product. So it gives students a sense of ownership, it gives them a sense of responsibility, and it gives them a sense of pride. They can look at this final project. Again, it's an authentic task. It needs to be a large, complex, hard thing to do that requires more than just what your course can provide. But once they accomplish that, then they can look and say, yeah, that's it. I've got it. This is the most amazing thing I've ever done. That's my 15 minutes. If you have any questions, great. Otherwise, enjoy the rest of your MADPD day. Hey, Nick, no worries on being late. I think this is getting recorded, so you can come back and watch it later if you like. But yeah, if you have any questions, let me know. I'm just going to sit here and drink my coffee for a few moments. But thank you all for coming along with me on this. I'm really excited for the rest of this day. And if you need to reach out to me as well, I'm on Twitter at the Ed Podcast. So just tweet straight at me. I live on that social network. And if you have any questions about this, if you have any questions about this, or you just want to touch base on anything else, or listen to my podcast, you can get in touch there. And I'll look forward to hearing from you. Have a great day, everybody. Now you get to watch me just drinking coffee. All right. No more questions. I'm going to head out. I will be seeing you around the MADPD world. Have a great day, everyone.